close your eyes and step into the frozen north. Tonight, we journey to the 9 realms, a world where God sought wisdom through sacrifice, where a great tree held all existence together, and where fate was carved in runes upon the branches of eternity. Let the cold winds of the north carry you into peaceful sleep. This is Nightly Lore. Norse Mythology, Odin's Wisdom and the 9 Realms. Odin sat upon his high seat in Asgard, watching over the 9 realms. The other gods called him All-Father, for he had shaped their world and given them purpose. From his throne Litskjalf, he could see everything that happened beneath the branches of Yggdrasil. Ravens perched on his shoulders, ready to fly out at dawn and bring back news from distant lands. The halls of Asgard rang with the voices of the Aesir gods, but when Odin spoke, all fell silent. Thor might wield his hammer with unmatched strength. Frigg might know the fates of all living things. But Odin held authority over them all. He had drunk from the well of wisdom. He had hung from the world tree for 9 nights. Knowledge and sacrifice had earned him this place. In the great hall where gods gathered, Odin's presence filled the space like winter wind. His single eye saw more than most could see with 2. The empty socket reminded everyone of the price he had paid for understanding. Here was a god who ruled, not through force alone, but through the weight of what he knew. The All-Father, keeper of secrets, watcher of worlds. Odin stood before the well at the roots of Yggdrasil. The waters below held something he needed, wisdom deeper than any god possessed. Mimir, the guardian of this sacred spring, watched as the All-Father approached. The price would be steep. Knowledge of all that was, all that is, and all that would come required sacrifice. The god reached up and removed his eye without hesitation. The pain meant nothing compared to what awaited. He let the eye fall into the dark waters where it would remain forever. Looking up through the depths, Mimir filled his horn from the well and offered it to Odin. The water was cold, older than the oldest ice of Niflheim. As he drank, understanding flooded through him. The threads of fate became visible. He saw the birth of worlds and their endings. He glimpsed the joy of creation and the sorrow of destruction. Past and future collapsed into a single moment of terrible clarity. From that day forward, Odin wore his missing eye as a mark of the price of wisdom. The well still holds that eye, and Mimir still guards the waters that know all things. Odin hung from the great ash tree, rope tied around his neck, his own spear thrust through his side. For 9 days and 9 nights, he swayed in the cold wind that moved through Yggdrasil's branches. No one brought him food. No one brought him water. The other gods could only watch as their king suffered by his own choice. The tree held all the worlds in its branches and roots. Somewhere in its depths lay knowledge that even the All-Father did not possess. The runes, those strange marks that held power over fate itself, remained hidden from him. So he made himself a sacrifice to himself, the god offering his own pain for wisdom. On the 9th night, as frost gathered on his beard and the stars wheeled overhead, something shifted. Below him, in the darkness beneath the world tree's roots, shapes began to form. The runes revealed themselves at last, 18 of them rising from the depths. With his remaining strength, he reached down and grasped them, crying out as knowledge flooded through him. When the rope finally broke and he fell to the ground, he carried the runes with him. The price of wisdom had been paid. Each morning, 2 ravens lifted from Odin's shoulders. Hugin and Munin spread their black wings against the pale sky and flew out across all the 9 realms. Their names meant thought and memory, and they served as the All-Father's eyes where his own could not reach. Throughout the day, the ravens soared over mountains and valleys, cities and wilderness. They perched on windowsills and tree branches, watching battles and harvests, deaths and births. Nothing escaped their sharp gaze. They saw kings plotting in their halls and farmers working their fields. They witnessed giants stirring in their mountain homes and elves dancing in hidden groves. The birds flew through storms and clear skies alike, gathering every whisper of news from the worlds below. At dusk, they returned to Asgard. Odin sat on his high throne as the ravens settled on his shoulders, one on each side. They bent close to his ears and spoke in voices only he could understand, telling him everything they had seen. Through them, the one-eyed god knew all that happened beneath the branches of Yggdrasil. Some nights their news brought him satisfaction. Other nights, it deepened the furrows on his brow. Odin's mount had 8 legs instead of 4. Sleipnir carried the god between worlds faster than wind could blow through mountain passes. No other horse in any realm could match the gray stallion's speed. When Odin needed to travel from Asgard's golden halls to Midgard's forests, or down to Helheim's silent gates, Sleipnir bore him there without tiring. The horse's hooves struck sparks from the rainbow bridge when they crossed it. Guards at every realm's border knew the sound of those 8 feet approaching through morning mist. Some say Sleipnir could run across water and through air as easily as solid ground. The stallion waited patiently outside mead halls while Odin wandered inside wearing his traveler's disguise. In the darkest winter nights, people sometimes heard thunder without lightning. The old women said it was Sleipnir's hooves drumming across the sky as Odin rode out seeking knowledge in distant corners of the worlds. The horse knew every path through Yggdrasil's branches, every route that connected one realm to another, where other horses would shy away from the void between worlds. Sleipnir galloped forward without hesitation, carrying his one-eyed rider wherever wisdom waited to be found. The spear rested against Odin's throne in the great hall of Asgard. Gungnir was its name, and the dwarves had forged it in their underground workshops where fire met stone. They had worked the metal with skills no god possessed, shaping it beneath the mountain's heart until it gleamed like winter starlight. When they presented it to the Allfather, they spoke a single promise. This weapon would never miss its mark. In battle, the spear flew true. When Odin hurled it over enemy armies, it found its target through storm and darkness. The weapon seemed to know its purpose before it left his hand. Warriors would see it arc across the sky, a line of light against gray clouds, and know their fate was sealed. Even when the god wandered the 9 realms in disguise, his spear traveled with him, sometimes as a walking staff, sometimes hidden until needed. The dwarves had woven more than accuracy into the metal. Oaths sworn upon Gungnir could not be broken. Treaties and promises gained weight when the spear's point touched the ground between those who swore. Its power lay not just in war, but in the binding of words, as solid as the mountain stone from which it came. Valhalla stood in Asgard, its roof thatched with golden shields that caught the light of distant stars. This was Odin's hall, where warriors who fell with weapons in their hands found themselves after death. The Valkyries brought them here, riding through storm clouds to gather the brave from battlefields below. Inside the vast hall, the chosen warriors spent their days in strange contentment. Each morning they would arm themselves and march through the 540 doors, meeting on the plains outside to fight as they had in life. Spears clashed against shields. Swords rang out in the cold air. By evening, all wounds healed, all deaths undone, and the warriors returned as companions to the benches within. The nights brought different pleasures. Mead flowed from the udder of a goat that fed on Yggdrasil's leaves. The boar Asrimner was cooked each evening and reborn each dawn to feed the countless warriors. They sang and boasted of their deeds, while wolves prowled near Odin's throne and ravens perched on the rafters above. This cycle would continue until the horn sounded for Ragnarök. Then these gathered dead would march beside the gods in the final battle against the forces of chaos. The Valkyries rode through smoke and steel, their armor gleaming as they moved above the battlefield. These divine maidens served Odin, carrying out his will among the dying. They could see what mortal eyes could not, which warriors had fought with honor, which had shown courage in their final moments. The chosen ones would not remain in the cold earth. On swift horses that could gallop through air as easily as across ground, the Valkyries descended. Their presence brought a strange peace to those they selected. The pain faded. The world grew quiet. Then came the journey upward, away from blood-soaked fields toward the golden hall that waited beyond the clouds. In the old stories, warriors spoke of seeing them in the moments before a great battle's shadows passing overhead, the glint of spear points in morning light. Some said they heard the horses' hooves like distant thunder. The Valkyries decided who would feast in Valhalla and who would go to other halls, other fates. They were not cruel, merely dutiful. Each fallen warrior went where the gods decreed. The maidens continued their eternal ride, moving between the world of men and the realm of gods, carrying heroes home. The mead of poetry belonged to the giants. They kept it in 3 great cauldrons, deep in their mountain halls, guarded by Sutun and his daughter Gunnlod. This was no ordinary drink. Those who tasted even a drop would find words flowing like water, their tongues touched by the gift of perfect speech. Odin wanted this mead. He traveled to the giant's realm in disguise, calling himself Bulwark the evildoer. For a full season he worked the fields of Suttung's brother, cutting grain under the mountain's shadow. His payment would be 1 sip of the precious mead. But giants rarely keep their promises to gods. When the work was done, Suttun refused. So Odin changed his approach. He transformed himself into a serpent and slithered through a crack in the mountain. Inside, he found Gunnlod guarding the 3 cauldrons. For 3 nights he stayed with her, and for each night she allowed him 1 drink. Odin drank deeply. He drained every cauldron, holding the mead in his mouth and belly. Then he transformed into an eagle and flew toward Asgard, the giants pursuing. The mead of poetry was his, and through him, it would flow into the world of gods and men. The middle day of the week carries the god's name. Wednesday comes from the Old English Woodnest, Woodnest Day. Woden was what the Anglo-Saxon peoples called Odin when they brought their beliefs across the cold northern seas. The Romans had named this day after Mercury, their messenger god who guided souls between worlds. But the northern peoples saw their own wanderer in that role. They gave the day to Odin, who walked between all 9 realms. The name traveled through time like the god himself traveled through worlds. From Woodness it became Wednesday, though the connection grew quiet over centuries. Most who speak the name now don't hear the god's presence in it, but the old association remains, woven into the very fabric of how we mark our weeks. Every 7 days, whether we know it or not, we speak of the one-eyed god who traded his eye for wisdom, the wanderer, the all-father, the seeker who hung 9 days on the world tree to learn the runes. His day returns with each turn of the week, a small echo of the old stories that once shaped how people understood their world. Frigg sat at her spindle in Fensalir, her hall in Asgard, where the clouds gathered like wool around her dwelling. She was Odin's wife, goddess of marriage and motherhood, keeper of every household's peace. The threads moved through her fingers as she worked, each strand holding more than simple fiber. She could see what was coming. Like her husband, Frigg possessed the sight that reached beyond the present moment into the twisting paths of fate. The future spread before her like the tapestry she wove. But where Odin wandered the world seeking knowledge, trading eyes and hanging from trees for wisdom, Frigg remained still and silent with what she knew. Her visions stayed locked within her. The other gods might ask, might plead to know their fates, but her lips remained sealed. She saw the threads of every life, saw where they would tangle and where they would break, but she spoke none of it aloud. Perhaps silence was its own form of mercy. Perhaps some truths were too heavy for words. In her hall among the clouds, Frigg continued her weaving, knowing all that would come to pass, keeping her terrible knowledge close. The roads of Midgard knew many travelers, but none quite like the old wanderer who appeared at crossroads when the sun grew low. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face, a gray cloak dusted with the dirt of distant lands, and carried a staff worn smooth by countless miles. Those who met him saw only what he wished them to see, a weary traveler seeking shelter from the coming night. At farmstead doors and lonely halls, the stranger would knock. His voice was rough with age, his requests simple: a place by the fire, a bowl of whatever was cooking, perhaps some bread. The wealthy sometimes turned him away, too busy with their feasts to notice the gleam of something deeper in his single visible eye. But the poor, those who had little, often shared what they could spare. They gave him their last heel of bread, their warmest corner by the hearth. Only later, when strange fortune followed their kindness, or when they remembered the odd weight of his questions, did some wonder who their guest had truly been. The All-Father walked among them, hidden in plain sight, measuring the worth of mortal hearts through the oldest test of all. Odin carried many names and many roles. He was the god who led armies into battle, yet also the one who sat alone, seeking knowledge in the darkness. War and wisdom lived together in him, two faces of the same restless spirit. He knew the words that could heal and the words that could destroy. He spoke prophecies that even he could not escape. The god understood magic in ways that made other gods uneasy. He practiced seer, the art of seeing and shaping fate, though this was considered women's work. He hung himself from Yggdrasil for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, to learn the secrets of the runes. Poetry flowed from him like honey, stolen from the giants in forms both clever and strange. Ravens brought him news from all 9 realms. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, perched on his shoulders when they returned each dusk. Through their eyes, he saw everything. Through his one remaining eye, he saw even more. The other he had traded to Mimir for a drink from the well of wisdom. Knowledge always came at a price, and Odin paid it willingly, again and again. The All-Father knew every form of magic. He studied the runes, drank from wisdom's well, and mastered Galdr, the art of spoken spells. But there was another magic, older and stranger, that called to him. Seer was the weaving of fate itself, a practice that let the practitioner see what was coming and sometimes change its course. This was women's magic, the domain of Volvas and Seeresses who sat at their looms and worked their will upon the threads of destiny. In the halls of Asgard, warriors spoke of honor and strength. They valued direct action, the swing of an axe, the courage to face death with eyes open. For a man to practice seer was to invite whispers and scorn. It was considered unmanly, shameful, beneath a warrior's dignity. Yet Odin cared nothing for their whispers. He who had hung himself on the world tree for knowledge would not stop at social boundaries. The one-eyed god learned seer from Freya herself, mistress of this art. He wore women's clothing when the magic required it. He sang the high keening songs. He sat at the loom of fate and pulled at threads others could not even see. Wisdom demanded all sacrifices, even pride. Beneath Valhalla's foundations, in chambers few would ever see, Odin kept his strangest counselor. The head of Mimir rested on a stone shelf, preserved by herbs the All-Father gathered from the 9 worlds. Morning frost still clung to the sage leaves and bitter roots that kept decay at bay. The god would descend these stairs when questions grew too heavy for even his wisdom to bear. Mimir had once walked among the Aesir, wisest of them all, save perhaps Odin himself. But the war between gods and Vanir had demanded hostages, and Mimir's body had been lost to enemy blades. Only his head returned to Asgard. Where others saw tragedy, Odin saw opportunity. Death need not silence wisdom. The herbs did their work well. Color remained in the severed head's cheeks. When Odin spoke the proper words, Mimir's eyes would open, clouded but aware. His voice came as a whisper from lips that should not move. He spoke of things that were, things that are, and things that waited in tomorrow's shadow. Even Odin, who had hung 9 days on the world tree for knowledge, still sought the counsel of this preserved friend when the weight of ruling all realms pressed upon him. Yggdrasil stood at the center of everything. The ash tree reached upward through endless sky and plunged its roots deep into the foundations of existence. Its trunk was so vast that no one could see around it, and its branches spread wide enough to shelter all 9 realms. In the highest branches, an eagle perched, watching the worlds below. At the deepest root, the dragon Hggr gnawed endlessly at the wood. Between them, a squirrel called Ratatoskr ran up and down the trunk, carrying messages and insults between eagle and dragon. The tree held steady through it all. 3 roots anchored Yggdrasil. One stretched toward the well of fate where the Norns wove destiny. Another reached the well of wisdom where Mimir kept his knowledge. The third descended into the spring where countless serpents writhed in icy waters. From these roots, the tree drew its strength. Every morning the Norns would draw water from their well and pour it over Yggdrasil's bark, keeping the great ash healthy despite the dragon's constant gnawing. The tree connected all things gods and giants, elves and dwarves, the living and the dead. Without Yggdrasil, the 9 realms would drift apart into the void. The great tree had many names, but the one that endured was Yggdrasil. The word itself held a darker meaning than most realized. Ig was another name for Odin, and Drasil meant steed or horse. Together they formed a grim truth about the tree's purpose and the god's quest for wisdom. The connection came from 9 nights when Odin hung himself from the ash tree's branches. No food passed his lips. No water touched his tongue. His spear had pierced his side, and he swayed in the cold wind that moved through the upper branches. Those who saw gallows knew them as the horse of the hanged, where Bodhis swayed like riders on a terrible mount. This was how the world tree earned its name. During those 9 nights, Odin hung suspended between life and death, between the worlds above and below. The tree bore his weight as he gazed down into the depths where the runes waited. His sacrifice upon those branches transformed the ash into something more than wood and leaf. It became Yggdrasil, Odin's horse, the gallows tree where a god paid the price for knowledge that would echo through all the 9 realms. The world tree stands at the center of all things, its trunk rising beyond sight, its branches holding the 9 realms. But beneath the earth, 3 roots anchor this great ash, each massive beyond measure, each reaching into a different world. One root stretches toward Asgard, where the gods gather for council. There, beneath the root, lies the well of Ord, its waters holding the threads of fate. The Norns sit beside these waters, weaving what has been and what will be. Another root reaches into Jotunheim, the land of giants, where Mimir's well rests in shadow. Its waters hold wisdom, knowledge bought with sacrifice. The third root descends into Niflheim, that realm of ice and mist where all cold things began. There, in the darkness, the spring Hvergelmir bubbles and churns, feeding 11 rivers that flow outward like veins through the void. Near this spring, the dragon gnaws endlessly at the root, wearing it thin with patient hunger. These 3 roots hold everything in place. Through them, the tree drinks from different wells, different wisdoms, different fates. They bind the high realm of gods to the ancient realm of giants, to the primordial realm of ice, making all worlds one beneath the ash's embrace. Beneath the root that stretched into Asgard, the well of Ord held waters older than memory. Here the 3 Norns kept their vigil, Ordverdendi and Skuld past, present and future moved with purpose around the sacred pool. Each dawn they drew water from the well, carrying it up to pour over Yggdrasil's mighty root. The water ran white as they worked, mixing with the pale clay that lined the well's edge. This daily ritual sustained the great ash tree. Without the Norns' careful tending, even Yggdrasil would wither. They spoke little as they worked, these weavers of fate. Their hands moved in practiced rhythm, drawing water, pouring, drawing again. The drops that fell from the tree's leaves became the morning dew that covered all the worlds below. The gods themselves came to this well for judgment. Here beneath the tree, at the water's edge, they held their daily court. The Norns watched these proceedings in silence, knowing already what decisions would be made, what futures would unfold. The well reflected more than faces, it held the threads of all that was, all that is, and all that would ever be. Beneath Yggdrasil's roots, where the sacred well Urgerbrunner reflected the sky, 3 sisters sat weaving. The Norns shaped the threads of fate for every living being. Ord, the eldest, held what had been her hands, knew every thread already woven into the great tapestry. Verdandi worked the present moment, her fingers moving steadily as each instant became real. Skuld, youngest of the 3, saw what must come. She held threads not yet spun, possibilities waiting to unfold. Together they worked in silence beside the well. No god could command them. Not even Odin himself could change what they wove. Each morning, the sisters drew water from their well and poured it over Yggdrasil's roots, keeping the great tree strong. The white clay from the well's edge they spread on the bark, protecting it from rot and decay. The gods would ride down from Asgard each day to hold council near the Norns' dwelling. They would watch the sisters work, knowing their own fates were held in those careful hands. Past, present, and future moved through the Norns' fingers like water, each moment flowing into the next, fixed and certain as the northern stars. High in the crown of Yggdrasil, where the uppermost branches touched the sky, an eagle made its home. This was no ordinary bird. Its wings spread wider than the roof of any hall, and its eyes held the sharp clarity of one who sees all things below. Between those keen eyes perched a hawk called Hverfgolnir, smaller but equally watchful, scanning the worlds that stretched beneath the great tree's canopy. From this height, the eagle could see everything. The golden roofs of Asgard caught the light in one direction. The iron forests of Jotunheim darkened another horizon. Far below, the dragon Hggr gnawed at the roots, while here above, the eagle kept its endless watch. The wind that moved through the world trees, leaves carried news from every realm, and the eagle heard it all. A squirrel named Ratatoskr ran up and down the trunk, carrying messages between the eagle and the dragon. Words of insult, mostly. The eagle would speak, the squirrel would scurry down through all the worlds, and return with the dragon's reply. This exchange never ended. While gods walked their halls and giants stirred in their mountains, the eagle watched, the hawk watched with it, and the tree held them all. Deep beneath the earth, where darkness pressed against the lowest root of Yggdrasil, a dragon worked without rest. Hggr was its name, and its purpose was destruction. The great serpent's teeth scraped endlessly against the ancient wood, gnawing through the centuries with patient hunger. Each bite sent tremors through the root system, small shudders that traveled up through the earth. The dragon dwelt in the cold springs of Hvergelmir, surrounded by the hissing of countless serpents that shared its task. Together, they chewed at the foundation of everything, trying to bring down the tree that held the 9 worlds in place. The sound of their gnawing echoed through the darkness, a steady rhythm like distant thunder that never ceased. Above, the eagle in Yggdrasil's crown knew of the dragon's work. Messages passed between them, carried by the squirrel Ratatoskr, who ran up and down the great trunk. Insults and threats flew between the heights and depths, while the dragon continued its endless task. The tree endured, its roots deep and strong, but Hggr never stopped trying. In the darkness below, the gnawing went on. The tree knew no peace from the messenger between its crown and roots. Ratatoskr the squirrel spent each day racing along Yggdrasil's massive trunk. His small claws gripped the ancient bark as he carried words that stung sharper than winter wind. Above, where the branches touched the sky, an eagle perched. Below, where darkness gathered around the roots, the dragon Hggr gnawed at the wood. They had never met, these two creatures bound to opposite ends of the world tree, but they knew each other through Ratatoskr's tireless journeys. The squirrel delighted in his task. Down he would race with the eagle's cutting words. Up he would climb with the dragon's bitter replies. Each message grew harsher as he carried it, each insult more elaborate than the last. The eagle spoke of the dragon's endless hunger, its destruction of the roots that held all things. The serpent below snarled about the eagle's arrogance, watching everything while doing nothing. Some said Ratatoskr sharpened these words himself, adding venom where there had been mere annoyance. The tree bore it all in silence, feeling the small feet race up and down its trunk through all the ages of the world. High in the branches of Yggdrasil, for stags moved through the endless canopy. Their names were Dane, Dvalin, Dunair, and Dura-Ar, and they fed on the world tree's leaves with steady persistence. Each stag claimed its own portion of the great ash, wandering through the branches that stretched toward different corners of existence. The beasts were magnificent, with antlers that caught the light filtering through the leaves. Day after day, They grazed among the highest boughs, their presence marking the 4 directions where the tree's branches reached furthest: north, south, east, and west. East and west, each stag knew its territory well. Their feeding never ceased, yet the tree endured, its leaves forever renewed, even as they were consumed. Below them, the 9 realms spread outward from the trunk. The stags paid no attention to the worlds beneath their hooves. They simply moved through their eternal paths, browsing on the tender shoots and older growth alike. Sometimes their forms could be glimpsed from the realms below, shadowy shapes moving against the sky where the great branches met the void. The cycle continued without end, the tree growing, the stags feeding, the directions marked by their ceaseless wandering. The great ash tree stood under constant siege. A stag gnawed at its highest leaves while 4 deer stripped bark from its trunk. Deep below, the dragony Hggr tore endlessly at its roots, trying to bring the whole structure down. Yet Yggdrasil remained green and strong, its leaves rustling in the wind that moved between worlds. Each day the 3 Norns climbed from their well beneath the roots. These sisters of fate carried water in their vessels, drawn from the sacred spring of Iward. They mixed the pure water with white clay from the well's edge, creating a substance that gleamed like morning frost. With care, they spread this mixture across the wounded bark, into every groove where teeth had torn, over each place where the tree showed damage. The sacred water healed what had been harmed, the clay sealed what had been opened. Where the dragon had gnawed through the night, new bark grew by morning. Where deer had fed, fresh shoots appeared. The tree that held all 9 worlds together could not be allowed to fail. So the Norns continued their work, day after day, maintaining the balance between destruction and renewal that kept the cosmos whole. The great tree would tremble when the end came. Its branches would sway and crack as the realms burned and froze, as gods fell and monsters broke free from their chains. Every root would shudder beneath the weight of battle. Yet even as fire swept through the worlds and ice shattered the old order, Yggdrasil would stand. The world tree had weathered the beginning of all things, and it would weather their end. Deep within the ash tree's trunk, in a hollow protected by ancient bark, 2 humans would find shelter, Leafy and Yggdrasil. Their names meant life and life's yearning. While thunder crashed and the wolf swallowed the sun, while the serpent thrashed in its death throes, and the rainbow bridge crumbled into nothing, these 2 would wait in the darkness of the tree. They would feed on morning dew that collected on the wood around them. They would hear the sounds of ending grow quiet, then silent. When they emerged, the world would be new. Green earth would rise from dark waters. The air would be clean. From these 2, hidden in the heart of the tree that connects all things, humanity would begin again. 9 worlds hung suspended in the branches and roots of Yggdrasil, each realm a complete universe unto itself. At the highest branches sat Asgard, where the Aesir built their gleaming halls, and Thor's hammer rang against the anvils of war. Nearby, Vanaheim housed the Vanir gods, those masters of magic and fertility who had once warred with the Aesir before making peace. The light elves dwelt in bright Elfheim, while deep below, the dark elves, the dwarfs, worked their forges in Svartalfheim's underground halls. Midgard belonged to humans, the middle realm encircled by the great serpent. East of Midgard stretched Jotunheim, land of giants, where frost and stone giants plotted against the gods from their mountain fortresses. Far to the north, Niflheim spread its ancient ice across primordial darkness, the first world born from the void. Its opposite lay to the south, Muspelheim, realm of fire, where Surtur waited with his flaming sword. Below Midgard, beneath the roots where Yggdrasil touched the underworld, Helheim opened its gates to receive the dead. Half-living hell ruled there, gathering those who died of age or sickness rather than battle. 9 realms, 9 realities, all bound together by the world tree's endless reach. High above the branches of Yggdrasil sits Asgard, the realm of the Aesir. Its halls gleam with gold in the endless light that bathes the gods' domain. Here, where no winter wind can reach, the divine ones make their home behind great walls built by giant hands long ago. The realm spreads wide across the highest branches of the world tree. Golden-roofed halls stand among green fields that never know frost. In the center rises Gladsheim, where the high seat of Odin looks out across all 9 worlds. Near it stands Valhalla with its 540 doors, each wide enough for 800 warriors to pass through side by side. From Asgard to the world of men stretches Bifrost, the rainbow bridge. It shimmers with 3 colors woven from fire and water and air. The gods ride across it on their journeys to Midgard below. Heimdall watches at its edge, his sight reaching to the ends of all worlds. His hearing so keen he can hear the wool growing on sheep far below. The bridge trembles slightly under the weight of thunder when Thor crosses, but it holds firm, connecting the realm of gods to the realm of men. At the center of all the worlds lay Midgard, where humans made their homes beneath the spreading branches of the great tree. The gods had shaped this middle realm from the body of the first giant, using his flesh to form the earth and his blood to create the vast ocean that would forever separate mortals from the frost giants who dwelt beyond. This ocean wrapped around Midgard like a protective embrace. No ship could cross its endless waters, no bridge could span its width. The giants remained in their distant lands, looking across the impossible expanse toward the smoke rising from human hearths. Sometimes, on the coldest nights, their frustration echoed across the water as distant thunder. Within this sheltered realm, humans built their lives. They farmed the soil that had once been giant flesh, fished the rivers that branched from that ancient blood ocean, and told stories around their fires about the gods who had given them this protected home. Above them, the rainbow bridge connected their world to Asgard, a shimmering reminder that they were not forgotten. The ocean held back chaos. The gods watched from above. And in this middle place, between divine light and giant shadow, humanity endured. Vanaheim stretched across the western reaches of creation, a realm where rivers wound through endless forests and the earth itself seemed to breathe. This was the home of the Vanir, the gods who understood the secrets of growth and harvest, who knew the language of seeds and seasons. Unlike their Aesir kin who ruled from golden halls, the Vanir moved through their world like wind through wheat fields. The Vanir possessed a different kind of wisdom. Where Odin sought knowledge through sacrifice and pain, these gods found understanding in the turning of seasons and the patient work of cultivation. They knew the names of every plant that could heal or harm, every ritual that would make the fields flourish. Their magic, called seer, flowed like sap through spring branches, inevitable, powerful. Nijr ruled the winds and waters from this realm. His children, Freya and Freya, carried the Vanir gifts of abundance and desire. The realm itself reflected their nature, wilder than Asgard, older somehow, with forests that remembered the first spring. Even after some Vanir came to live among the Aesir, Vanaheim remained patient, fertile, waiting at the edge of the world tree's western boughs. Beyond the borders of the ordered realms, Jotunheim stretched wild and untamed. Mountains rose like broken teeth against the sky, their peaks lost in cloud and storm. This was the land of giants, where no walls contained the wilderness and no halls gleamed with gold. The Jotnar made their homes in mountain caves and deep valleys, where the wind howled between stone cliffs. The giants were old, older than most of the Aesir who ruled in Asgard. They remembered when the world was young, when ice and fire first met in the void. Some were vast as mountains themselves. Others could walk among gods unnoticed. They were not evil, though the gods often named them so. They were simply other beings of chaos, where Asgard sought order, of wilderness, where the Aesir built walls. The tension between these realms ran deep as winter rivers. Giants possessed wisdom the gods craved. Aesir held treasures the Jotnar desired. They met in conflict and occasionally in marriage, for the boundaries between enemy and kin blurred like frost on morning glass. The mountains of Jotunheim stood eternal, watching Asgard's golden halls across the void, waiting. Above the middle branches of Yggdrasil, where sunlight gathered in pools of radiance, lay Alfheim. This was the realm of the light elves, beings so beautiful that their presence made the air itself seem to glow. Unlike the dark elves who dwelt deep beneath the earth, these creatures moved through their bright world with the grace of morning mist. The light elves were neither gods nor humans, but something between. Their beauty was said to surpass even that of the Vanir. In their realm, no shadow fell without purpose, and every corner held a soft luminescence that came from no visible source. The elves themselves seemed woven from this light, their forms shifting between solid and ethereal as they moved through their radiant halls. These beings held sway over growth and abundance. When spring came to Midgard, when seeds sprouted in dark soil, and green shoots pushed toward the sun, it was the light elves who guided this awakening. They were the unseen hands that blessed the harvest, the quiet presence in blooming meadows. Freyr, the Vanir god of fertility and prosperity, ruled over their realm, finding in Alfheim a kingdom that matched his own nature, bright, generous, and forever touched by the promise of new life. Below the surface of all things, where daylight never reached, lay the dwarves had made their home in these caverns and tunnels, far from the brightness that hurt their eyes. Stone halls stretched through the darkness, lit only by forge fires that never went out. The ringing of hammers on anvils echoed through the passages, a rhythm as old as the world itself. The dwarves worked their craft in the deepest places. They knew the secrets of metal and stone, understood how to weave magic into gold and iron. Their fingers shaped impossible things, chains that could hold wolves destined to devour gods, hammers that would never miss their mark, rings that multiplied themselves each ninth night. The dark elves, their kin, or perhaps the same people by another name, shared these underground halls. They moved through the shadows with purpose, tending their forges, shaping their works. No treasure compared to what came from dwarf hands. The gods themselves sought their skill, trading and bargaining for weapons and wonders. In the darkness of Svartalfheim, away from the eyes of the world above, the greatest treasures of the 9 realms took shape in the glow of the forge. In the beginning, before the gods walked or the tree grew tall, there was this world of ice stretched endlessly through the void, wrapped in freezing mist that never lifted. No warmth had ever touched this place. No light had ever broken through its gray fog. The cold here was absolute, older than memory, older than time itself. Deep within Niflheim lay a spring called Age. From this well, 11 rivers flowed outward into the darkness. The Yggdrasil, as they were called, carried poison in their waters. As these rivers rushed away from their source, the bitter cold turned them to ice. Layer upon layer built up through the ages, growing into massive glaciers that groaned and cracked in the silence. The mist rose constantly from where the waters met the ice. It drifted upward and outward, filling the emptiness with its chill. This was the cold that would one day meet the fires of Muspelheim in the great void between worlds. From that meeting, from ice touching flame, all existence would begin. But for now, Niflheim waited in its frozen darkness, its rivers flowing eternally from the ancient spring. Muspelheim burned at the southern edge of creation. This was the realm of fire, where flames danced eternal and lava flowed like rivers through a land that had never known cold. The heat here was older than most things in the cosmos. It had existed before the first frost of Niflheim, before the void of Ginnungup filled with worlds. Surtur ruled this burning land. The fire giant stood taller than mountains, his skin glowing with the heat of forge fires. In his hand he carried a flaming sword that burned brighter than the sun itself. The stories say this blade would one day set the world tree ablaze. But for now, Surtur waited in his realm of endless flame. The ground of Muspelheim cracked and shifted. Volcanic mountains rose black against the fire-bright sky. Rivers of molten rock carved new paths through the landscape, while geysers of flame erupted without warning. No water existed here. No snow could ever fall. This was pure fire, the opposite of frozen Niflheim. The two realms sat at opposite ends of all things, separated by the vast emptiness that had given birth to the first life. Beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, past the spring where fate was woven, lay Helheim. This was the land of the dead, where most souls traveled after their final breath. Not the warriors chosen for Valhalla, but those who died in their beds, claimed by age or illness. The realm stretched vast and gray beneath eternal mist. Hel herself ruled this domain. Daughter of Loki, she was half living, half dead. One side of her body pale as any living woman, the other dark as a corpse. She sat in her great hall called Eljaynir, where the walls dripped with moisture and the cold never lifted. Her dish was named hunger, her knife famine. Yet she was not cruel, only distant, watching over the countless dead who filled her realm. The journey to Helheim led downward through valleys and across the river Chel, where the maiden Modguar kept watch at the Golden Bridge. The dead arrived on foot or horseback, their burial goods determining their comfort in this gray eternity. Here they dwelt, neither suffering nor rejoicing, in halls that echoed with quiet voices and memories of the world above. The rainbow bridge stretched between the worlds, its colors shifting in the northern sky. Bifrost connected the realm of gods to the realm of humans below, a shimmering path that only the divine could truly see. 3 colors wove through its span, the red of fire, the blue of water, and the clear shimmer of air itself. These were not mere decoration, but the essence of creation, the same elements that had shaped the worlds when time began. Each day, Heimdall stood at the bridge's edge where it met Asgard's borders. His eyes saw across all 9 realms, watching for threats that might climb the rainbow's arc. The bridge trembled slightly under the hooves of horses when gods rode down to Midgard, but it held firm, strong as the oath that bound it. Below in Midgard, humans sometimes glimpsed the bridge after storms. When rain and sun met in the sky, they pointed to the colors, knowing the gods traveled that road. The bridge would stand until the end of days, when it too would shatter and fall. But for now, it gleamed against the darkness, connecting heaven and earth with bands of ancient light. At the edge of Asgard, where the rainbow bridge meets the sky, Heimdall stands watch. His eyes see across all 9 realms, through darkness and storm, through mist and shadow. The guardian never sleeps. He needs less rest than a bird needs to close its eyes, and his ears can hear the wool growing on sheep in distant Midgard. The bridge beneath his feet shimmers with all the colors that light can hold. Bifrost stretches from the halls of the gods down to the worlds below, and Heimdall knows every creature that crosses it. Giants cannot slip past him. No enemy can approach Asgard while he keeps his vigil. At his side rests Jallarhorn, the horn that will sound only once more. When the wolf breaks free, when the serpent rises from the sea, when fire and frost march toward the final battle, Heimdall will raise the horn to his lips. Its call will echo through every branch of Yggdrasil, reaching the deepest roots and highest leaves. Gods will arm themselves. The dead will march. The end will begin with that single, piercing note that Heimdall has waited through all the ages to sound. Valhalla rose like a mountain in Asgard, its roof thatched with golden shields that caught the light. The Hall of the Slain stretched across the horizon, vast enough to hold all who would fall in battle until the end of days. 540 doors stood in its walls. Through each of these great entrances, 800 warriors could march side by side. The mathematics spoke of preparation. When Ragnarök came, when the wolf broke free and the fire giants marched, Odin's chosen would need to move quickly. 432,000 warriors would pour from those doors at once, spears raised, shields locked together. The hall was built for this moment. Inside, the Einherjar feasted each night. They fought each day in the fields beyond, testing their skills, keeping their edges sharp, but always their eyes turned to those doors. They knew why there were so many. They knew why each was so wide. The final battle would not wait for single file lines or narrow passages. When the horn sounded its last call, when the gods themselves took up their weapons, every door would open at once. The army of the honored dead would flow out like a river of iron and courage. In Valhalla's great hall, the warriors gathered each evening around long wooden tables. The fires burned high as the cooks brought forth Esrimnir, the magical boar that fed all who had fallen in battle. Steam rose from the meat as it was carved and served to the Einherjar, those chosen dead who would fight for Odin when Ragnarök came. The boar was no ordinary beast. Each morning, Esrimnir lived again, whole and unmarked, ready to be hunted and prepared once more. The cauldron that held him could feed any number of warriors, no matter how many filled the benches of Valhalla. The meat never ran short, the platters never emptied. This was part of the promise. Those who died with sword in hand would want for nothing in Odin's hall. They would feast each night on the finest food, drink mead that flowed like rivers, and wake each dawn ready to fight again on the practice grounds. Esrimnir's flesh gave them strength for the endless cycle of battle and celebration. The boar's sacrifice and rebirth mirrored their own existence in that golden hall, where death had already come and life continued in a different form. Above Valhalla's golden roof, a goat named Heyrin stewed among the highest branches. She reached for the tender leaves of Larar, the tree that grew there, chewing slowly as warriors feasted below. From her udders flowed an endless stream of the finest mead, filling a vast cauldron that could never empty. The Einherjar, those who had fallen in battle and been chosen for Odin's hall, drank deeply from their horns. Each day after training and fighting, After their wounds had healed and their strength returned, they would gather in the great hall. The mead flowed golden and sweet, and no matter how much they drank, more always came. The goat continued her steady eating, the leaves never running out, the mead never ceasing its flow. This was part of the hall's magic. Just as the boar Esfrimner was slaughtered each day for feast and returned whole each morning, so too did Hearness mead renew itself. The warriors would need this strength. They drank and prepared, knowing that when the final horn sounded, when the wolf came to the gates, they would march out one last time. Odin possessed another hall in Asgard, one that served a different purpose than Valhalla's warrior feasts. This was Valaskjalf, built with walls of silver that caught the pale northern light. The hall stood apart from the others, quiet and watchful, its silver roof gleaming beneath the stars. Within, Valaskjalf sat a throne unlike any other in the 9 realms. Lidskjalf called it the high seat from which all things could be seen. When Odin settled onto this throne, his single eye could pierce through the boundaries between worlds. From this seat, he watched the frost giants plotting in Jotunheim's icy wastes. He observed the dwarves hammering in their mountain forges. He saw mortals in Midgard going about their daily lives, unaware of the gods' gaze upon them. No secret could hide from Lidskjalf's view. No whispered conversation in the darkest corner of Helheim escaped the Allfather's sight. The throne gave him knowledge of all that transpired across Yggdrasil's branches, every birth, every death, every small betrayal and great deed. Sometimes Frigg would join him there, the only other being permitted to sit upon the high seat, sharing in the burden of seeing all. Thor made his home in Thrudheim, the land of strength that stretched across Asgard's eastern reaches. There stood Bilskirnir, his great hall, rising above all other buildings in the realm of the gods. No structure in Asgard matched its size. Not even Odin's halls could rival the thunder god's dwelling. 540 rooms spread through Bilskirnir's massive frame. The builders had crafted each doorway tall enough for the god to pass through without ducking, each hall wide enough for his broad shoulders. In the main feast hall, the ceiling soared so high that smoke from the central fire dispersed long before reaching the rafters. The walls themselves seemed to hum with distant thunder, as if the storms Thor commanded had left their mark in the very timbers. Warriors who died beneath lightning strikes found themselves welcomed here. They drank from Thor's generous stores of ale and told their tales while the god listened, his red beard catching the firelight. Outside, goats grazed the grounds of Thrudheim, while the wind carried the scent of rain across the threshold. Even in rest, the god of thunder kept his hammer close, ready for the next journey to Midgard's defense. Freya's hall stood in the field of Folkvanger, where golden light touched the grass even in winter. Half of all warriors who fell in battle came to her, not to Odin's Valhalla. This was the agreement between the two gods, made long ago when the worlds were younger. The Vanir goddess chose first from among the fallen, selecting those she wanted for her own hall. Her warriors rested in peace beneath her roof, while Valhalla echoed with the clash of practiced battles and the roar of endless feasting. Folkvanger held a different kind of strength. The goddess of love and death, of beauty and war, understood what the fallen needed. Some required the gentle healing that only she could provide. Her hall gave them rest after the violence of their final moments. The division was equal and absolute. For every warrior who rode with the Valkyries to Odin's golden-shielded hall, another followed Freya's cats through the gates of Folkvanger. Both afterlives honored the brave, both prepared for what would come. But in Freya's domain, The fallen found something Valhalla could not offer, the quiet understanding of a goddess who knew both love and loss. The walls of Asgard stood incomplete when a stranger arrived at the gods' gates. He was a master builder, he said, and could finish the fortification in a single winter. His price was steep the sun, the moon, and Freya herself. The gods gathered in their hall to debate. Without proper walls, they remained vulnerable to attack from the giants who dwelt beyond their borders. Loki spoke up, suggesting terms that seemed impossible. If the builder could complete the walls in one winter, working alone except for his horse, then he would have his payment. But if he failed, he would receive nothing. The builder agreed, and the gods smiled at their cleverness. As winter deepened, they watched with growing alarm. The builder worked through the frozen nights, and his stallions Vodalfari hauled massive stones across the snow. The walls rose higher and stronger than any the gods had seen. With only days remaining, it became clear the builder would succeed. The sun and moon would be lost. Freya would be taken. The builder was no ordinary craftsman. He was a mountain giant in disguise, and the gods had been deceived by one of their oldest enemies. The gods found Ymir's body where he had fallen, vast and still in the void. Odin and his brothers worked together, shaping what would become the middle world. They lifted the giant's flesh and spread it wide, forming solid ground where before there had been only emptiness. The earth took shape beneath their hands, rolling into hills and valleys, stretching into plains that would one day know the footsteps of men. Where Ymir's blood had pooled, it became the seas. Dark waters flowed into the hollows of the world, creating oceans that surrounded the new land. Rivers ran like veins through the earth, carrying the giant's blood in endless circuits. The gods set boundaries between land and water, containing the surging tides within shores they carved from bone. This was how Midgard came to be not through gentle creation, but through transformation of the fallen. The giant's body became the foundation of the human world, his ancient flesh now soil and stone. Even the mountains that would rise toward the sky held traces of what Ymir had been, massive and enduring as the giant himself. Odin walked the empty shore with his brothers Vili and Vi. The waves rolled against sand that had never known footprints. No voices called across the water. No fires burned in the darkness. The world was ready, but it was silent. 2 trees lay where the tide had left them, an ash and an elm, their bark still damp with seawater. The brothers stopped. Something about these 2 pieces of driftwood made them pause. Perhaps it was their shape, or how they rested together on the sand. Odin gave them breath and life. His lungs filled the hollow wood with spirit. Vili gave them will and movement, the ability to think and choose. Vi gave them warmth and speech, the spark that would make them more than living wood. The ash became Ask, the first man. The elm became Embla, the first woman. They stood on the shore, blinking in new light, feeling sand beneath feet that had been roots. The gods wrapped them in simple clothes and showed them the way to Midgard, the world that would be theirs. From these 2, found by chance on an empty beach, all human life would grow. The serpent called Jarmungandr lay coiled in the deep waters that surrounded Midgard. So vast was this child of Loki, that its body wrapped entirely around the human world. And in the cold depths of the ocean, the creature grasped its own tail between its jaws. The gods had cast it into the sea when it was young, fearing its growth. Now it had become exactly what they feared. Fishermen sometimes spoke of strange currents, far from shore, places where the water moved against the wind. They said these were the spots where the serpent shifted in its sleep. The weight of its coils pressed against the ocean floor, creating valleys no human would ever see. Above, ships sailed unknowing over its massive form. The serpent's grip was all that held the boundaries of Midgard in place. Should it ever release its tail, the waters would rush inward, the edges of the world would fray and dissolve. Thor and the serpent had met before, and they would meet again. But for now, Jormungandr rested in the darkness beneath the waves. Its slow breathing creating the tides, its presence keeping the world whole through the simple act of holding on. The serpent child of Loki began its life in the halls of the gods. When Odin looked upon the creature, he saw what it would become. The All-Father took Jormungandr in his hands and cast it from Asgard into the deep waters that surrounded Midgard. In those cold, dark depths, the serpent found its home. It grew. Day by day, year by year, its body stretched longer through the currents. The ocean became its domain. Fish fled before its shadow. Whales turned away from waters where the serpent passed. Still it grew, coiling through trenches no light could reach, winding past underwater mountains, always growing longer. The tales say that Jormungandr eventually grew so vast that it could wrap around all of Midgard. Its body formed a circle in the depths, and when it finally grew long enough, the serpent took its own tail in its mouth. There it rested, holding the world in its coils. Ships sailed above, never knowing what moved in the darkness beneath their hulls. The world serpent had found its place, patient in the depths, waiting for the day it would rise again to meet its destiny. Thor watched over Midgard with his hammer at his side. The strongest of the Aesir, he rode across the sky in his chariot pulled by goats, bringing thunder in his wake. Whenever giants threatened the world of humans, Thor would cross the rainbow bridge and drive them back. His red beard and fierce eyes were known in every corner of creation. But there was one enemy that haunted Thor's thoughts more than any other. Jormungandr, the world serpent, lay coiled in the dark waters that surrounded Midgard. The serpent had grown so vast that it circled the entire world, grasping its own tail in its jaws. Born of Loki's bloodline, cast into the ocean by Odin himself, the serpent waited beneath the waves. The god and the serpent had met before. Their hatred ran deep as the ocean trenches. Thor had once tried to lift the creature while it was disguised as a cat. Another time, he had nearly pulled it from the sea with his fishing line before the giant Hymir cut the rope in terror. Both times, the serpent had slipped away. They would meet one final time when the world ended. Thunder God and world serpent would face each other as the realms burned. Neither would survive that meeting. Beyond the shores of Midgard, where the land meets the horizon, stretches an ocean without end. The waters run deep and cold, darker than winter nights. No mortal vessel has ever crossed these waters and returned to tell of what lies beyond. The gods placed this barrier between the human world and the other realms, knowing that some boundaries should not be crossed by those who are not meant to cross them. In the depths, creatures move through the darkness. The greatest of these is Jormungandr, the world serpent, whose body encircles all of Midgard like a living wall. The serpent lies with its tail in its mouth, holding the ocean in an eternal embrace. Sailors who venture too far from shore speak of shadows beneath their boats, of scales breaking the surface in the distance, of waters that suddenly turn black as pitch. The ocean protects and imprisons in equal measure. While humans build their lives on solid ground, surrounded by forests and fields and mountains, They know that at the edge of their world waits an ocean they cannot conquer. The other 8 realms remain distant, separated by more than simple distance. The sea keeps its own counsel, and its monsters ensure the god's design holds firm. The old roads through Midgard knew more than mortal footsteps. Sometimes a wanderer would appear at the edge of a village, gray-cloaked and leaning on a walking staff. One eye would gleam beneath his wide-brimmed hat, while the other remained hidden in shadow. Farmers would offer bread and meat to such travelers, never knowing if they entertained a beggar or the All-Father himself. The gods took many forms when they walked among humans. Thor might appear as a young warrior seeking shelter from a storm. Freya could arrive as a woman asking for news of distant lands. They came to test the hospitality of households, to judge the honor of jarls, to see if the old ways still lived in human hearts. Those who showed kindness to strangers often found their stores mysteriously replenished. Those who turned travelers away discovered their luck had fled with the morning mist. From these visits came children who carried divine blood in their veins, heroes who could lift boulders, warriors who heard the raven's speech, women who knew which herbs could heal any wound. The boundary between God and human blurred in these meetings, creating bloodlines that would echo through the generations. Jotunheim sprawled across the eastern edge of creation, a land of stone peaks that scraped the sky in valleys so deep, their bottoms never saw sunlight. The giants made their homes here, in halls carved from mountain faces, or hidden in forests where the trees grew so thick that perpetual twilight reigned beneath their branches. Snow fell year-round in the higher places, and the wind carried ice crystals that could cut exposed skin. The realm itself seemed built for beings of enormous size. Boulders the size of houses lay scattered across the landscape, tossed there during fights between giant clans. Rivers ran wild and cold through the wilderness, fed by glaciers that had never melted since the world's beginning. Even the wildlife grew larger werewolves that stood shoulder high to a man, eagles with wingspans that could block out the sun. This was the homeland of those who opposed the gods, yet it possessed its own savage beauty. Under winter stars, the mountain peaks glowed with reflected light. In the deepest forests, ancient paths wound between trees older than memory. The giants knew every stone, every frozen stream, every hidden cave in their vast domain. The giants were not demons or monsters in the tales. They were older than the gods, born from the primordial ice and fire when the world was still taking shape. Their blood ran with the wild forces that existed before order came to the cosmos. In their mountain halls and storm-swept fortresses, they lived by different rules than those who dwelt in Asgard. Thor fought them, yes. His hammer rang against their skulls in countless battles. But the gods also married giant daughters and sought giant wisdom. Odin's own mother was of giant blood. The boundaries between God and giant blurred more often than the stories first suggest. What separated them was not good and evil, but their relationship to the world's making. Where gods built halls and bridges, giants preferred the wilderness. Where gods crafted laws and oaths, giants moved like avalanches and storms. They were winter itself, earthquake and flood. The mountain that would not be carved into shape, not evil, but untamed, not wrong, but unwilling to kneel. The tension between giant and god was the tension between the wild world and those who would organize it. The gods and giants were not as separate as the tales might suggest. Odin himself carried giant blood in his veins. His mother Besla came from the frost giants who dwelt in the cold reaches beyond Asgard. She was daughter to Bolthorn, one of the ancient giants who lived when the world was still forming from ice and fire. This mingling of bloodlines ran through many of the Aesir. Thor's mother was Yor, the earth herself, counted among the giant kin. Loki, who moved between worlds as easily as smoke between fingers, was fully giant-born, yet lived among the gods. Even Tyr, steadfast god of justice, traced his line back to the giants of old. The boundaries between divine and giant were drawn more by choice than birth. Those who stood with the Aesir in their gleaming halls were gods. Those who dwelt in Jotunheim, in Utgard and the wild places, remained giants. But the blood remembered. In the faces of gods and giants alike, you could see the same ancient features, carved by the same primordial forces that shaped the first beings from Ymir's flesh. Thor's hammer went missing once. The thunder god woke to find Mjolnir gone from his side. The thief was Thrym, a giant king who lived in the mountains of Jut. He had hidden the hammer deep beneath the earth, 8 miles down where no god could reach it. His price for its return was simple and impossible. He wanted Freya as his bride. The goddess refused with such fury that her necklace burst apart, golden pieces scattering across Asgard's floors. So Thor dressed as the bride instead, his red beard hidden beneath a veil, his massive frame wrapped in wedding clothes. Loki accompanied him, disguised as a bridesmaid. Another giant brought different troubles. Utgard Loki ruled a hall where nothing was as it seemed. When Thor visited this place, he competed in contests he could not win. He drank from a horn that was secretly connected to the ocean. He wrestled an old woman who was actually aged itself. He tried to lift a cat that was truly the world serpent in disguise. Only later did Thor learn how thoroughly he had been deceived. The giants possessed their own forms of power, different from the strength of gods, but no less formidable. The giants knew things the gods did not. They had been here first, before Asgard's golden halls rose above the clouds, before the Aesir claimed their thrones. In mountain caves and frost-covered valleys, they kept their secrets close. When Odin sought wisdom, his path often led to giant lands. The head of Mimir, wisest of all beings, had giant blood flowing through it. The god would ride to the borders of Jotunheim, wrapped in his blue cloak against the bitter wind, seeking knowledge that only the old ones possessed. Not all meetings ended in battle. Sometimes a giant would share what they knew, though always for a price. They understood the workings of the world in ways that went deeper than godly power. They remembered the first winter, the first thaw, the first stirring of life in the void. The gods might rule from their bright halls, but they came to the giants when they needed to understand what lay beneath the surface of things. Pride would not let them acknowledge this debt openly. Yet in the cold reaches where giants dwelt, wisdom waited for those brave enough to seek it. The oldest stories lived there, in the ice and stone. The river Ifingru flowed between two worlds, marking the boundary where god territory ended and giant land began. No bridge spanned these waters. No ice formed on their surface, even in the deepest winter. The current ran swift and dark, carrying something more than water in, old separation that kept Asgard and Jotunheim apart. The gods looked across from their high walls and saw mountain peaks rising in the distance. The giants gazed back from their stone fortresses, watching the gleaming halls beyond the uncrossable water. Both sides knew this river by its nature. It would flow forever, neither warming nor cooling, neither flooding nor running dry. The water moved with purpose, maintaining the divide between order and chaos, between the world of the Aesir and the ancient realm of the Jotnar. Sometimes a god would stand at the riverbank, listening to the constant flow. Sometimes a giant would do the same from the opposite shore. They could see each other across the moving darkness, but the river held its line. This was how the worlds remained close enough to watch, far enough to stay separate, with Eyfinger running endlessly between them, keeper of an unspoken treaty written in water and time. Loki came from the land of giants, born to the frost giant Farbati and the giantess Laufey. His blood ran with the old chaos of Jotunheim, where ice cracked across endless winters, and giants carved their halls from frozen stone. Yet he did not remain there. Long ago, before the roots of memory reached deep, Odin and Loki mixed their blood in sacred brotherhood. The ritual bound them closer than kinship, and through this oath, the shapeshifter gained his place among the Aesir. In Asgard's golden halls, Loki moved between worlds, neither fully god nor fully giant. He walked the shining corridors where Frigg wove fate and Thor's hammer hung waiting. The other gods watched him with careful eyes. They knew his quick tongue and quicker mind. They knew his laughter could bring gifts or grief. Still, he feasted at their tables and slept beneath their roofs, protected by ancient oaths that even the gods would not break. His children would be monsters. His tricks would bring sorrow. But for now, he stood beside Odin in the Great Hall, a giant among gods, bound by blood spilled beneath the northern stars. The end would come from many directions at once. From the south, Surtur would lead the fire giants across the rainbow bridge, his flaming sword brighter than the sun itself. The bridge would crack and fall beneath their weight, its colors scattered into darkness. From the east, the frost giants would follow their own ancient paths, their hatred for the gods as cold as the ice that formed them. Loki would break free from his chains beneath the earth, where snake venom had dripped on his face for countless winters. His children would join him, the wolf Fenrir with jaws wide enough to swallow the sky, and the serpent Jarmungandr rising from the depths of the sea. Together they would lead the host of enemies the gods had made through the long ages. The giants remembered every wrong, every slight, every wall built to keep them out of Asgard. They remembered Odin's broken promises and Thor's hammer striking down their kin. At Ragnarök, all debts would be settled. The final horn would sound, and gods and giants would meet on the plain of Yggdrasil, where the last battle would unfold exactly as the prophecies had foretold. Above Midgard, where the branches of Yggdrasil reached toward endless sky, lay Alfheim. This was the home of the light elves, beings who moved through meadows that never knew winter's touch. Spring held this realm in gentle hands, and the air itself seemed to carry a soft luminescence that came from no single source. The light elves were neither gods nor mortals. They dwelt in halls built from living wood and crystal, where music drifted between the trees like morning mist. Their forms were said to shine faintly, as if they had absorbed the perpetual radiance of their world. In Alfheim, flowers bloomed without end, and clear streams wound through groves where leaves whispered in warm breezes. The Aesir rarely visited this peaceful realm. Though Freyr once ruled here, the elves kept to their bright domain, tending to growing things and weaving their quiet magic through root and branch. No harsh word was spoken in their halls, no weapon was forged in their workshops. They lived as gardeners of light, maintaining the gentle balance of their eternal spring while the other realms turned through their cycles of struggle and season. The light elves dwelt in Alfheim, one of the 9 worlds that hung from Yggdrasil's branches. They were beings of such radiance, that those who glimpsed them said they were fairer than the sun itself. Their forms seemed to hold the gentle light of dawn, the soft glow that touches frost-covered grass in early morning. In Alfheim, where these beings made their home, the air itself carried a different quality. The realm lay high among the branches of the world tree, closer to the crown than to the roots. Here, the light elves moved through their bright halls, tending to matters mortals rarely understood. They were connected to the growing things of all the worlds, the first green shoots that pushed through snow, the slow unfurling of leaves in spring, the patient work of seeds becoming trees. The god Freyr ruled over their realm, though the light elves needed little governing. They were gentle creatures by nature, as different from their dark elf cousins as day from night. While the dark elves worked their forges deep beneath the earth, the light elves remained above, where sunlight could reach them. Their presence brought growth and gentle fortune to the places they touched. The gods gave unusual gifts to their children. When Freyr cut his first tooth, the Aesir presented him with an entire realm. Alfheim became his domain, a world of perpetual twilight where light elves dwelled among silver trees and luminous flowers. The god of fertility and abundance found himself master of beings made from morning mist and starlight. Freyr brought his gentle nature to this shimmering land. Where other gods ruled with thunder or trickery, he governed with the same quiet power that made grain grow tall and fruit ripen on the branch. The light elves, those creatures too beautiful for mortal eyes to bear, served him willingly. They tended gardens that bloomed without seasons and wove cloths from moonbeams and halls that glowed with their own soft radiance. From Alfheim's highest towers, Freyr could see across the branches of Yggdrasil to other realms. Sometimes he would visit Midgard, bringing favorable winds and golden harvests, but he always returned to his realm of eternal dusk, where the air itself seemed to shimmer with gentle magic, and the light elves sang in voices like wind chimes. The teething gift had grown into a perfect match between god and domain. Deep beneath the surface of the world, where sunlight never reached and the air hung thick with forged smoke, lay Svartalfheim. The realm of the dwarves stretched through endless caverns and tunnels carved from living rock. Here, in the perpetual darkness, the sound of hammers on anvils echoed without rest. The dwarves worked by the glow of their forges. Their hands, though small, possessed skill no god could match. In these underground halls, they shaped gold into forms that seemed alive, hammered silver into threads, finer than spider's silk, and breathed magic into metal. Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, Draupnir, Odin's golden ring that dripped 8 identical rings every 9th night, Gullinbursti, Freyr's golden boar with bristles that lit the darkest paths. Each treasure born in darkness carried the power of its makers. The dwarves needed no sun. They knew stone and metal as old friends, reading veins of ore-like runes in the rock. Their realm connected to all others through winding passages, for the roots of Yggdrasil touched even these depths. In Svartalfheim, darkness was not emptiness but possibility, not absence but the perfect condition for creation. The forges of the dwarves burned deep beneath the mountains. There, in caverns lit by molten gold, the greatest smiths shaped treasures for the gods. Their hammers rang against metal that would never break, never fail. These were no ordinary craftsmen. Their skills surpassed all others in the 9 realms. 3 gifts became the pride of Asgard. First came Gungnir, the spear that would never miss its mark. Odin carried it into every battle, every journey. The dwarves had woven fate itself into the weapon's shaft. Next, they forged Mjolnir, a hammer that could level mountains and always return to Thor's hand. Lightning lived in its head, thunder in its handle. When the god swung it, the very sky would crack. The third gift was different. When Loki's mischief left Sif without her golden hair, the dwarves spun new strands from the finest gold. Each thread caught light like summer wheat. They placed it upon her head, and it grew there, shining and alive. The gods marveled at such craft. Even they, with all their power, could not match what dwarf hands had made in the darkness below. The gifts would serve them until the end of days. The sky rested on the shoulders of 4 dwarfs. Their names were Nori, Sori, Ostri, and Vestri, north, south, east, and west. Each stood at his corner of the world, bearing the weight of the heavens above. The dome they carried was the skull of Ymir, the first giant, transformed by the gods into the blue vault that covered all the realms. Day and night, season after season, the 4 dwarves held their positions. The burden never left their shoulders. When storms rolled across Midgard, the dwarves felt the thunder shake through their bones. When gentle rains fell, they sensed the lightness in the air above them. The stars that wheeled overhead were sparks from Muspelheim, fixed into the skull dome by the gods, and the dwarves knew each constellation's weight. Sometimes, in the cold hours before dawn, frost would gather on their beards. The northern lights would dance above Nori's corner, while Suri faced the warmer winds. Ostri greeted each sunrise, and Vestri watched it sink beyond the edge of the world. Together, they kept the sky from falling, their strength as constant as the roots of Yggdrasil itself. In the beginning, after the gods had slain the first giant Ymir, and fashioned the world from his body, something stirred in the ancient flesh. Where the giant's form lay cooling, small creatures began to move, maggots, crawling through the remains of the primordial being. The gods watched these pale worms writhing in the darkness beneath the earth. Then came the decision that would change the shape of the world. The gods gathered and spoke words of power over these crawling things. Consciousness sparked where there had been only mindless movement. The maggots stood upright, their forms shifting, becoming something new. They were dwarves now, with thoughts and speech, with memory and will. These new beings made their homes deep in the earth, in the darkness where they had first awakened. They learned to work stone and metal with skill no other creatures possessed. 4 of them, Nordri, Sudri, Ostri, and Vestri were set at the corners of the sky to hold up the vault the gods had made from Ymir's skull. The rest spread through the underground halls and caverns, masters of the deep places, carrying within them always the memory of their strange birth from death into life. The dwarves knew what sunlight could do. A single ray touching their skin would begin the change, turning flesh to stone in moments. So they stayed below, in the vast halls they had carved beneath the mountains. Their realm lay far from the brightness of day, connected to the surface world only by tunnels that twisted deep into shadow. In the darkness of their workshops, the dwarves moved freely. Their eyes had long adjusted to the dim glow of forge fires and the faint light of precious stones embedded in cavern walls. They worked through endless nights that never knew dawn, hammering out treasures that even the gods desired. Time meant little in these depths, where no sun marked the passing hours. Sometimes a dwarf might venture too close to the surface, drawn by trade or curiosity, but they always watched the sky, always calculated the hours until sunrise. The stories spoke of those who had miscounted, who had lingered too long in the upper tunnels. Stone figures stood as warnings where daylight had caught them, frozen forever in their final moment of realization. The living dwarves passed these monuments in silence, returning always to the safety of the deep darkness below. In the beginning, before the gods walked or the tree grew, there were two realms. Niflheim stretched endlessly in the north, a world of ice and freezing mist. No sun warmed this place, no stars marked its boundaries, only cold and darkness filled its vast expanse. From deep within Niflheim, a spring called Yggdrasil bubbled up through the ice. 11 rivers flowed from this well, their waters so cold they turned to frost as they moved. These rivers, the Yggdrasil, carried poisonous drops that hardened into ice, layer upon layer, building the foundation of what would become the void between worlds. The fog rose constantly from where the waters met the ice. It drifted through the darkness, freezing into rime that coated everything it touched. This was not a dead cold but a living one, moving and growing, pushing always outward. In the south lay Muspelheim with its flames, but here in Niflheim, ice ruled absolute. The two realms existed apart, separated by the great emptiness of yet their meeting would spark the first life, when fire's heat met ice's chill in that yawning void. In the beginning, before gods walked or worlds took shape, there was ice and emptiness. Niflheim stretched cold and dark, a realm of mist and shadow where no warmth could reach. From deep within this frozen land, 11 rivers began their journey. The Yggdrasil, they were called ancient waters that carried more than ice. These rivers flowed outward from their hidden spring, rushing through the darkness. As they traveled farther from their source, the bitter cold grew stronger. The waters slowed, thickened, and something strange rose from their depths. Venom, black and thick, bubbled up through the current. This poison froze as it touched the air, layer upon layer building in the void. Where the frozen venom gathered, where ice met the first stirrings of something else, a form began to take shape. Ymir emerged from this meeting of elements, the first of the giants, born from poison ice and primal cold. He was vast, this ancestor of giants, larger than mountains that did not yet exist. The Yggdrasil continued to flow around him, their waters feeding the ice, their venom creating new forms in the darkness. This was how life first stirred in the void, born not from warmth but from the frozen rivers of Niflheim. Deep beneath the frozen waste of Niflheim, where frost gathered thick on ancient stone, the spring called Yggdrasil churned without rest. The waters boiled and roared in their stone basin, sending up clouds of vapor that froze instantly in the bitter air. From this cauldron spring flowed the 11 rivers that would become the Yggdrasil, their waters carrying the cold of the underworld through all the northern lands. Here in the darkness beneath the deepest roots of Yggdrasil, the dragon Hggr made his dwelling. The great serpent coiled around the spring, his scales black as the lightless depths where he lived. Between his endless gnawing at the world tree's roots, he would sink into the roiling waters of Yggdrasil, drawing strength from the spring that had bubbled since before the first dawn. The sound of the cauldron's churning mixed with the scraping of dragon teeth on wood, creating a rhythm that echoed through the caverns of the dead. No warmth reached this place, no stars shone here. Only the spring's ceaseless roar and the patient work of the dragon marked the passage of time in Niflheim's heart. Fire burned before anything else existed. Muspelheim stretched endless and blazing, a world of pure flame where nothing could grow and no water could survive. The realm pulsed with heat that would have melted stone, if stone had existed then. This was not the controlled fire of a hearth or forge. This was raw, primal flame that danced and roared through emptiness. To the north lay Niflheim, the world of ice and mist. Between these two extremes gaped Ginnungagap, the yawning void. The stories tell how fire and ice existed in perfect opposition, neither touching, neither mixing, held apart by nothingness itself. Muspelheim's flames leaped eternally upward, throwing sparks into the darkness. The realm knew no night, no rest, no cooling wind. Only Surtur could dwell there, the fire giant who waited with his flaming sword. The heat of Muspelheim would one day matter to all things. Its sparks would meet the ice of Niflheim in the void. From that meeting, from fire touching frost, the first drops of life would form. But in the beginning, Muspelheim simply burned, patient and terrible. A realm of pure element waiting for its role in the greater pattern of creation. Fire burned eternal in Muspelheim. At the realm's edge stood Surtur, the fire giant whose flaming sword had never cooled. He was older than memory, older than the gods themselves. When the void still yawned empty between ice and flame, Surtur was already there, watching, waiting. His blade casting shadows that danced like living things. The stories say he stood at the border of his realm, neither advancing nor retreating. His vigil had purpose. The heat from his domain pushed against the cold of Niflheim, and where they met, the first drops of life had formed. But Surtur cared nothing for creation. His eyes looked always northward, toward Asgard and the shining bridge that spanned the sky. In his hand, the sword pulsed with its own heartbeat of flame. This was no ordinary fire, but the first fire, the flame that would one day consume even Yggdrasil itself. The gods knew this. In their halls, they spoke his name quietly. They understood that Surtur waited not because he could not leave Muspelheim, but because his time had not yet come. When it did, nothing would stop his march across the Rainbow Bridge. In the southern reaches of existence, where heat shimmers and smoke rises eternal, Surtur stands guard at the edge of Muspelheim. The fire giant holds a sword that burns without rest. The blade throws light fiercer than sunlight, casting shadows that dance across molten stone and rivers of flame. Those who glimpsed this weapon in their visions said its glow hurt to witness, even in dreams. The giant has waited there since before the first gods drew breath. His vigil never wavers. The sword never dims. When the bonds that hold the world together finally break, when the wolf runs free and the serpent rises from the deep, Surtur will march north from his realm of fire. The prophecies speak clearly of this moment. His blade will cut through the air itself, leaving trails of flame that nothing can quench. The burning will be complete. Every branch of the great tree will catch light. Every root will char. The golden halls of Asgard will melt. The frozen wastes of Niflheim will steam and vanish. Even the waters that surround all things will boil away. Fire will meet ice one final time, and fire will win. The Rainbow Bridge would not hold forever. When the final winter gripped the worlds and the wolf swallowed the sun, the sons of Muspel would ride forth from their realm of fire. These beings, born in the southern flames, where Surtur waited with his burning sword, would thunder across Bifrost in numbers beyond counting. The bridge that had carried gods between worlds for countless ages would tremble beneath their weight. Heimdall would see them coming from his post at the bridge's edge. His golden eyes, which could spot a blade of grass growing in distant Midgard, would watch the fire giants approach like a wave of flame rolling across the void. The bridge would groan. Colors that had shimmered since the first days would begin to crack. Red would splinter from orange. blue would separate from green. The structure that connected Asgard to the lower worlds would bend, then break, then fall in fragments of light into the dark spaces between the roots of Yggdrasil. Without Bifrost, the gods would face their enemies on the plain of Vigrid with no escape route back to their halls. The way between worlds would be severed. The sons of Muspel would arrive for the last battle, and behind them, the bridge would be nothing but memory and scattered light. In the beginning, there was emptiness. The void called Ginnungup stretched between two worlds, Niflheim in the north, where ice and mist gathered in endless winter, and Muspelheim in the south, where flames danced without fuel or form. The cold of Niflheim was absolute. 11 rivers flowed from its depths, their waters freezing as they moved, building walls of ice that crept toward the center of the void. From Muspelheim, sparks and embers drifted outward, carried on winds that had no source. Where these opposites met, something changed. The heat softened the ice, the cold tempered the flames. In that meeting place, neither frozen nor burning, drops of water began to form. These drops fell into the void, and from them came the first stirrings of what would become life. The frost melted slowly, persistently. Steam rose where fire touched ice. In this mist, in this space between extremes, the first being took shape, Ymir, the ancestor of giants. The stories tell us that all existence began here, in the balance between ice and flame, in the heart of emptiness where opposites could finally meet. The road to Helheim led down through the mists of Niflheim, always descending, always turning north. Those who made this journey found themselves moving deeper into cold and shadow, where the ice grew thick and the darkness pressed close. The path wound between frozen valleys and beneath glacial bridges, each step taking the traveler farther from the light of the upper worlds. In the deepest part of Niflheim, where even the cold seemed to hold its breath, Helheim waited. Here the darkness was not merely absence of light, but something heavier, older. The realm of the dead lay at the bottom of all things, as far north as north could go, where the roots of the world tree barely reached. This was where Hel kept her hall, half in shadow, half in something darker still. The journey down was one few among the living ever made. The god Hermo rode this path once, his 8-legged horse carrying him through 9 nights of deepening darkness. Each night grew colder than the last, each day dimmer, until finally he reached the gates where the dead wait in silence. In the cold halls beneath the earth, where mist gathered thick and no living thing grew, Hel ruled over the dead. She was Loki's daughter, born of the giantess Angraboa, sister to the wolf Fenrir and the world serpent. The gods had cast her down to the depths when she was young, giving her dominion over those who died of sickness or old age. Those who saw her spoke of a figure divided. One half of her body showed the features of a living woman, skin that held warmth and color. The other half bore the pallor of the grave, flesh touched by frost and shadow. This division ran through her entirely, from crown to feet, marking her as a being who belonged to both life and death, yet fully to neither. Her realm took her name. In Helheim she sat on a throne that overlooked endless gray fields, where the ordinary dead wandered. Not the warriors who fell in battle and went to Valhalla, but all the others. The old who died in their beds, children taken by winter fever, those whose deaths came quietly. She received them all with the same still gaze, half living, half lost to the world above. Death came in many forms, and each path led to a different realm. Those who fell in battle with sword in hand found their way to Valhalla's golden halls, where they would feast and fight until the end of days. But most deaths were quieter. The old farmer who closed his eyes for the final time in his bed, the child taken by winter fever, the merchant who drowned in a storm, these souls traveled a different road. The path to Helheim wound downward through mist and shadow. It was not a place of torment, as some later stories would claim, but a vast, cold realm where the goddess Hel ruled over the quiet dead. She was half living, half corpse, and she welcomed all who came to her gates without judgment. In her halls, the dead found rest rather than glory. They did not feast with heroes or prepare for final battles. They simply were, existing in the gray twilight of her domain, where the living could not follow and where memories grew thin as morning fog. This was the fate that awaited most, not dishonor, but a different kind of ending. Helheim stretched beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, a vast realm of mist and shadow. This was where most of the dead came to rest, not warriors chosen for Valhalla, but those who died of sickness, old age, or simple misfortune. The goddess Hel ruled here from her hall called Eljanir, half her body living, half corpse pale. No fires burned the dead here. No demons tormented souls. The realm was neither reward nor punishment, just existence. Gray mist rolled between gray hills. The river Jael flowed cold and silent toward the bridge where Modgur kept watch. The dead walked slowly through this twilight land, their forms growing fainter with each passing age. Some called it dreary. The living feared its colorless halls and endless fog, but the dead seemed to carry no suffering, only a quiet weariness. They gathered in groups, speaking in whispers that faded like morning frost. Time moved differently. Heraday might feel like a year like a single breath. The cold touched everything, not the sharp cold of winter, but something deeper, the cold of stone halls that had never known warmth. This was Helheim, the silent kingdom beneath the earth. At the edge of Helheim, where the living dare not venture, a great hound waits in darkness. Garmr is his name, and his howl echoes through the cold spaces between worlds. The massive beast lies chained within Nibelheimr, a cave that opens like a wound in the earth. His eyes burn in the shadows, watching the path that leads down to Hel's domain. The chains that bind him are thick as tree trunks, forged by hands that knew this day would come. They hold him now, but the metal strains against his strength. Every soul that passes on its final journey sees those eyes watching from the cave mouth. The dead walk by in silence while Garmr tests his bonds, pulling against the inevitable. When Ragnarök arrives, the stories say the chains will break. The hound will burst free from Nibelheimr's depths, his howl announcing the end of all things. He will meet Tyr on the battlefield, god and beast locked in final combat. But for now, he waits in the darkness, guardian of the border between the living and the dead, counting the moments until his chains fall away. Between the world of the living and the realm of the dead flowed a river called Gel. Its waters ran cold and dark, marking the boundary that all souls must cross on their final journey. A single bridge spanned these waters, Jalarbra, built from gold that gleamed even in the perpetual twilight of that border place. At the bridge stood Morjuyu, or the giantess who kept watch. She was neither cruel nor kind, but simply present, as she had been since the first soul made its crossing. Those who approached found her waiting, tall and still as the mountains from which her kin had come. She would ask each traveler their name and lineage, for even in death, the old customs held meaning. The bridge beneath their feet rang differently for each soul thunder, for warriors fallen in battle, whispers for those who died quietly in their beds. Morgiu heard each crossing and remembered them all. Behind her lay the road to Hell's domain, where most of the dead would dwell. She never turned to look that way. Her duty was the bridge, the questions, the passage onward into whatever waited in the mist beyond. Deep beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, past the wells and the coiled dragon, lay the realm of the dead. Here stood Eljaynir, the hall of Hell, daughter of Loki. The name meant sleet cold, and those who entered felt winter's grip in their bones. This was not Valhalla with its golden roof and eternal feast. This was the quiet place where most of the dead came to rest. Inside the vast hall, Hell kept a strange household. Her table bore the name Hunger, carved into wood that never warmed. The knife beside her plate was called Famine, its blade eternally sharp, yet never used for cutting meat or bread. These were not tools for eating, but reminders of what the dead had left behind. The living knew warmth and full bellies. The dead knew only the cold halls of Eljaynir. Hell herself sat at the head of this table, half living and half dead, watching over those who had not died in battle. Warriors went to Odin. The rest came here, to the sleet-cold hall where hunger was just a word carved in wood, where famine was just a knife that would never need to cut again. Baldur, brightest of the Aesir, lay still in Helheim's grey halls. The god of light and joy had fallen to treachery, and now dwelt in the realm of the dead. Odin's grief ran deep as mountain roots. His beloved son, the one all gods had sworn to protect, walked now among shadows rather than sunshine. The gods sent messengers to Hel, ruler of the dead. They pleaded for Baldur's return, speaking of empty halls in Asgard where his laughter once rang. The goddess of death sat on her throne, half living flesh and half corpse, considering their words. She had received what was rightfully hers, a soul delivered through death's door. Hel set her price. If every being in all the 9 realms would weep for Baldur, she would release him. The messengers rode hard through every world. Giants wept, stones wept, trees bent with sorrow. But in a cave sat one giantess who refused her tears. Some say this was Loki in disguise, completing his cruel work. Without universal grief, Hel kept her claim. Baldur would remain in her cold halls until the end of all things, waiting in the darkness while light faded from the world above. When the final winter comes, the gates of Helheim will open. Hel, daughter of Loki and ruler of the dead, will stand at the threshold of her realm. The stories tell us that she will release her subjects, then all, those who died of sickness or old age, all who fell outside battle's glory. They will rise from their cold halls beneath the earth. The dead will march northward in vast numbers. Warriors who never reached Valhalla, farmers who died in their beds, children taken by feverol will answer this last summons. They will cross the bridge from death's domain, their footsteps silent on frost-covered ground. No warmth will touch them. No memory of life will stir in their hollow eyes. They will join their queen's father, Loki, where he waits with the giants at the edge of all things. The fire giants from Muspelheim, the frost giants from Jotunheim, the dishonored dead from Helheim. Together, they will form the great host that marches against the gods. This army of endings will move across the land like winter itself, bringing the twilight that was always meant to come. The runes were more than marks carved in stone or wood. Each symbol carried its own name, its own force, its own purpose. Odin had hung from Yggdrasil for 9 nights to claim them, pierced by his own spear, staring into the depths until the shapes revealed themselves to him. They were not invented, but discovered, waiting in the darkness beneath the tree. Warriors carved them into swords to strengthen the blade. Mothers traced them over cradles to protect sleeping children. Those who knew the right combinations could bind wounds, calm storms, or turn enemies against each other. The wrong rune at the wrong time could bring sickness or madness. Knowledge of their use was carefully guarded, passed from master to student through whispered instruction. The runes could answer questions, but their messages were rarely simple. Cast upon cloth or carved in sequence, they showed what was, what is, and what might be. Some revealed themselves readily. Others remained hidden, their meanings known only to those who had paid the price to understand them. In the cold northern nights, the wise ones would study these symbols by firelight, seeking patterns in their angular forms. The old word for rune was runed. It meant secret, something hidden, knowledge whispered rather than spoken aloud. When warriors and farmers carved these angular marks into stone or wood, they weren't just making letters. They were working with something older, something that carried weight beyond simple writing. Odin himself had sought this knowledge. The stories tell how he hung from Yggdrasil's wind-swept branches for 9 long nights, pierced by his own spear, neither eating nor drinking. He stared down into the dark waters below, until the runes revealed themselves to him. Only through sacrifice did the symbols rise up from the depths, carrying their secrets with them. Each rune held its own nature. Some spoke of cattle and wealth. Others whispered of ice and need. There were runes for joy and runes for grief, runes that could bind and runes that could free. Those who knew their meanings could read more than words. They could glimpse the threads of fate itself, woven into every carved line. The knowledge was dangerous. It was precious, and like all true secrets in the northern world, it demanded respect from those who would use it. Odin hung from the great ash tree, a rope around his neck, his spear piercing his side. 9 nights he remained there, suspended between the worlds, with no food to sustain him and no water to ease his thirst. The wind moved through Yggdrasil's branches, carrying the cold of distant realms. Stars wheeled overhead while frost gathered on the god's beard. The All-Father had chosen this suffering. Knowledge demanded sacrifice, and he would pay the price. As hunger gnawed at him and thirst burned his throat, he stared down into the dark waters of the Well of Ord, far below. The tree creaked in the northern wind. Ravens circled but did not approach their master. On the 9th night, something shifted. In the depths beneath the roots, patterns began to form. Strange shapes emerged from shadow and starlight, each one carrying meaning, each one holding power. The runes rose up from the darkness like fire spreading through dry wood. Odin cried out as understanding flooded through him. The symbols burned themselves into his mind, tools of creation and destruction, keys to fate itself. When dawn came, he cut himself down, carrying the runes with him into the world above. The moment came suddenly. Knowledge flooded through Odin like fire through ice. The runes revealed themselves, their shapes, their meanings, their terrible power. 9 nights of hanging, 9 nights of pain, and now the wisdom rushed into him all at once. He cried out, a sound that echoed through all the worlds. It was not a scream of agony, but of overwhelming understanding. The ropes that held him to the great ash loosened. His body fell from the tree, tumbling through the cold air until he struck the earth below. He lay there for a time, changed. The knowledge of the runes burned behind his single eye. These were more than symbols scratched in stone or wood. They were the underlying patterns of creation itself, the secret language that shaped reality. When he finally rose, he carried this power with him. He could carve fate with these marks. He could bind and loose, curse and bless, reveal and conceal. The price had been paid in suffering. Now he walked the worlds as more than a god. He was a master of the runes, and their magic flowed through his every word and deed. The three sisters sat beneath Yggdrasil's vast trunk where the roots met the well of fate. The Norns worked in silence, their hands steady as they carved runes into the ancient wood. Each symbol they etched became a life, a thread in the great weaving of what would be. Word knew what had been, Verdandi saw what was, and Skuld glimpsed what must come. Together they shaped the destinies of all who drew breath in the 9 realms. No being escaped their work. Kings and farmers, gods and giants, all had their fates written in the tree's bark. The runes told of births and deaths, of meetings that would change the course of worlds, of small kindnesses and great betrayals. Even Odin himself could not escape what the sisters carved. He had seen his own ending written there, though he spent lifetimes seeking ways to delay it. The wood accepted every mark. Some runes glowed faintly in the half-light beneath the tree. Others settled deep into the bark, their meanings hidden until the appointed time. The Norns never paused in their task. Day and night held no meaning where they worked. There was only the endless carving of fate into the flesh of the world tree. The runes were more than marks on metal. Warriors who honored the old ways knew that each symbol carried power from the gods themselves. When a smith carved these angular lines into sword blade or shield rim, he was not merely decorating, he was binding divine protection into the weapon itself. The stories told how Odin had hung from Yggdrasil for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, to gain knowledge of the runes. That sacrifice had given these symbols their strength. A sword marked with tears, rune might strike truer in battle. A shield bearing alges could turn aside enemy blades. The runes connected the warrior to the realm of gods, making mortal weapons into something more. In the firelight of the forge, the carving would begin. Each stroke had to be precise. The smith would speak the names of the runes as he worked them into the iron. Some warriors chose runes for victory, others sought protection or strength. The metal would hold these marks and their power, carrying pieces of divine knowledge into the mortal world. The weapon became a bridge between Midgard and Asgard, blessed by the same symbols that Odin had suffered to understand. Odin walked the paths between worlds, wearing many faces. Sometimes he appeared as an old wanderer with a gray cloak and wide-brimmed hat, leaning on his walking staff. Other times he came as a warrior, a ferryman, or a simple traveler seeking shelter for the night. The god's hunger for knowledge pulled him forward, always forward. Through every realm the great ash tree touched. He would sit by fires in Midgard, listening to the stories mortals told. He questioned giants in their mountain halls and spoke with the dead in Hell's cold domain. The wisdom from Mimir as well and the runes from his hanging had opened doors. But behind each door waited 10 more. Every answer birthed new questions. Every secret revealed deeper mysteries. The ravens brought him news from across the 9 worlds each day, yet still he wandered. Knowledge lived in unlikely places, in the speech of birds, the memories of ancient beings, the dreams of seers. The All-Father understood that wisdom was not a treasure to be won once and kept. It was a flowing river, and he would drink from it until the wolf came for him at the world's end. The gods had gathered to make peace after their war. As was the custom, they sealed their treaty in an old way. Each god and goddess spat into a great vessel. From this mingled saliva, they shaped a being unlike any other. They called him Kvasir, and he carried within him the essence of every divine voice that had spoken into that vessel. Kvasir became the wisest being in all the realms. No question existed that he could not answer. He wandered the worlds, sharing knowledge wherever he went. But two dwarven brothers, Fjalar and Galar, saw opportunity in his wisdom. They invited him to their dwelling, where stone halls carved deep into mountain roots kept their secrets. There, in the darkness beneath the earth, they killed him. The dwarves drained Kvasir's blood into 3 vessels, 2 vats and a kettle. They mixed the blood with honey, and it fermented into a mead that would grant the gift of poetry and wisdom to any who drank it. This was how the most precious drink in all the 9 realms came to be, born from unity, ended in betrayal, transformed into something that would outlive them all. Ragnarök was written in the threads of fate long before the first god drew breath. The word itself meant the fate of the gods, their twilight and doom already woven by the Norns who sat beneath Yggdrasil's roots. Every god in Asgard knew this day would come. They had seen it in dreams, heard it whispered by seers, felt it in the trembling of the world tree when storms shook its highest branches. The prophecy spoke clearly. Gods and giants would meet in final battle across the plain of Vigrid. Old hatreds would ignite. Odin would face the wolf Fenrir. Thor would meet the world serpent one last time. Freyr would stand against the fire giant Surtur. The rainbow bridge would shatter. The great tree would groan and sway. Stars would fall from the sky like dying embers. This was not merely an ending, but a settling of accounts that began at creation. The gods knew their part. The giants knew theirs. Even now, as they feasted in golden halls or lurked in mountain caves, both sides prepared for that distant day when the horn would sound and fate would call them to their final purpose. The first sign would be winter that refused to end. 3 years of unbroken cold, the wise ones said, with no summer between them. They called it Fimbulwinter, the Great Winter, and it would grip all the 9 realms in ice that never thawed. Snow would fall without cease. The wind would carry only frost, never warmth. Fields would lie buried, and the sun would grow weak in the sky, offering no relief from the endless cold. Brothers would turn against brothers as food grew scarce. The bonds that held families together would freeze and shatter like ice on stone. This was how the end would announce itself. Not with fire at first, but with cold so complete that even memory of summer would fade. The wolves that chased the sun and moon would grow bold in the lengthening darkness. Ravens would fall silent. Even the roots of Yggdrasil would feel the bitter touch of frost creeping deeper than it had ever reached before. The gods in Asgard would know then that the final winter had come. No spring would follow, only the long cold, and after that, the breaking of all bonds that held the worlds in place. The wolf grew larger with each passing season. Fenrir, son of Loki, bound by chains the gods had forged through trickery and sacrifice. The beast lay in a distant place, jaws held open by a sword, waiting. The gods visited sometimes to check the bonds. They saw how his shoulders had broadened, how his eyes burned with patient fury. Odin knew what would come. The prophecies were clear about this. When the end times arrived, when the sky split and the earth shook, Fenrir would break free. The chains would snap like thread. The sword would fall from between his jaws. The wolf would race across the broken bridge toward Asgard. growing larger with each bound, his mouth opening wide enough to swallow the sun. The All-Father would meet him on the final battlefield. This too was known. The one-eyed god would raise his spear, but it would not be enough. Fenrir's jaws would close around him. The wolf would swallow the king of gods whole, fulfilling the fate spoken long ago. Odin's son Vidar would avenge him, but that comes later in the tale. First must come the swallowing. First must come the end. The horn called Jallarhorn rested at Heimdall's side, waiting for the moment it would sound across all 9 realms. The watchman of the gods stood at his post on Bifrost, the rainbow bridge, where he could see to the edges of existence. His golden teeth caught the light of distant stars as he watched, always watching for the first signs of the end. When the wolves began to devour the sun and moon, when the earth trembled and the great tree shook, Heimdall would know. He would lift the horn to his lips and blow a blast so deep and terrible that it would reach every corner of creation. The sound would wake gods from their halls, giants from their fortresses, and the dishonored dead from their cold sleep in Helheim. That call would be like no other sound ever heard. It would roll across mountains and pierce the depths of the sea. In Valhalla, warriors would stop their eternal feast and reach for weapons. In far Utgard, the giants would hear it and know their time had come. Even the dragon beneath the tree would pause in its gnawing to listen. All would know that the final battle approached. The rainbow bridge would break. This was written in the prophecies, spoken by the Volva who saw all endings. Bifrost, that shimmering path between worlds, would crack beneath the weight of fire giants marching from Muspelheim. The gods had always known this day would come. Fire would rise from the south, where Surtur waited with his burning blade. The flames would catch the lower branches of Yggdrasil first, climbing through wood that had stood since the beginning of all things. The great ash had weathered storms and the gnawing of dragons, but this fire was different. This fire was the end. Each of the 9 realms would feel the heat. Golden Asgard would burn. Midgard would burn. Even the icy depths of Niflheim would know flame before the end. The tree that held all worlds would become a torch lighting the final battle. But the sagas spoke of what came after. When ash settled and waters calmed, when the last ember died, something else would stir. The void that existed before creation would give way again. Green shoots would find their way through cooling earth. The destruction was certain, but so was the silence that followed. The end of all things was written in the runes, yet it was never truly an end. Ragnarök would come with fire and flood, with the breaking of bonds and the falling of gods. The great wolf would swallow the sun. The serpent would poison the sky. Thor would fall. Odin would fall. The golden halls of Asgard would burn to ash, and the 9 realms would shake until they broke apart like ice in spring. But the seers who spoke of this destruction also spoke of what came after. The earth would sink beneath dark waters, disappearing into the same void from which it once emerged. And then, when all seemed lost to darkness and silence, something would stir in those depths. The earth would rise again from the sea, green and fresh as the first day of creation. Water would fall from its mountains in silver streams. The eagle would fly once more above new forests. In fields unsown, grain would grow tall under a new sun. The surviving gods would meet on that fresh ground, finding golden game pieces in the grass where Asgard once stood. Life would begin again, as it always had, as it always would. Deep within Yggdrasil's trunk, a shelter waits. The stories tell of 2 humans who will find this refuge when the fires come, Elef and Elefrosser. Their names mean life and life yearner. While gods fall and realms burn, they will sleep protected inside the world tree itself. The morning dew will be their only food. Yggdrasil will provide what they need as the old world dies around them. Safe in the heartwood, they will hear neither the wolf's howl nor the serpent's thrash. The tree that connects all worlds will become their world entire. When silence finally comes, when ash settles and waters still, they will step out onto new earth. Green shoots will already push through fresh soil. The sun's daughter will ride across a gentler sky. From these two, humanity will grow again. Children will run where battlefields once scarred the ground. The tree knows this secret even now. Its branches hold the future as surely as they hold the eagle above. What seems like an ending carries tomorrow's beginning. The humans wait, though they do not yet know their names or their purpose. Yggdrasil keeps many secrets in its ancient wood. Some gods would not fall. Modi and Magni, Thor's sons, would walk the empty battlefield when the fires died. They would find Mjolnir lying in the ash where their father fell. The hammer that once protected the 9 realms would pass to them. Together they would lift it, 2 pairs of hands where one had been enough before. Vidar would survive because his purpose demanded it. The silent god had waited through all the ages for one moment to avenge his father. When Fenrir swallowed Odin whole, Vidar stepped forward. His thick boot, made for this day alone, pressed down on the wolf's lower jaw. His hands gripped the upper jaw and tore the beast apart. Then, his purpose complete, he would walk into the new world. Valley too would see the sun rise again. Born to avenge Baldur's death, grown to manhood in a single day, he carried justice in his blood. These sons would inherit an empty Asgard, a world without their fathers. But they would also inherit memory, strength, and the will to begin again. The divine line would not break. It would bend, change, and grow green in new soil. The earth rises green from the waters. Where fire and ice once met in final battle, new grass grows soft beneath a gentler sun. The survivors emerge from their hidden places. Vr and Vali, sons of the fallen gods, walk the quiet fields. They find golden game pieces in the grass, remnants of the gods' games before the wolf broke free and the serpent rose from the sea. To humans, Elef and Elefrosser step out from Hadmima's Holt, where they sheltered through the destruction. They have lived on morning dew while the worlds burned. Now they will people this renewed earth, and their children will know neither the weight of prophecy nor the shadow of inevitable doom. The sun's daughter rides across the sky, more beautiful than her mother who was swallowed by the wolf. In this new world, no frost giants march from the east. No dragons gnaw at roots. The surviving gods meet in peace where Asgard once stood, speaking of what was and what will be. Evil has passed away with the old world. The cycles of destruction have ended. A new age begins, clean and bright, where the stories of the old gods become memories told around new fires under stars that hold no prophecy. And so our journey through the 9 realms comes to a close. Yggdrasil still stands, the gods still watch from Asgard, and the runes remain, waiting for you to return. Thank you for wandering the realms with nightly lore, sweet dreams, and may the northern stars guide your sleep. Until next time, good night.